Excellent. Hello, everybody. You got Neil McCann here, SE with CyberMaxx. Been with the company about a year and a half now. 20 years in security, 6 of which I've been supporting MDR. Today we have a webinar session on a few case studies. We're going to go with Steve here. And Steve, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Neil. Well, we want to welcome everybody for joining here this morning or this afternoon, wherever you are. My name is Steve Wilson. I've been in cybersecurity also for about 20 years, but spent the last 7 years really in the MDR space itself. So again, we're glad you guys were able to join us, and we look forward to taking you through a little bit of an overview of CyberMaxx, what we do, and then digging into some case studies. So.
Yeah, appreciate that, Steve. Yeah, so as far as questions, we're definitely open to questions at any point. Looking at your particular application, I don't know what you're seeing from my perspective being a presenter, but I think it's at the top right. Feel free to just generate a question in there, and we'll do our best to get the answer out to you. But let's get into it. So CyberMaxx, we're the leading provider of modern managed detection response, MDR. We have a little mantra we like to say here at CyberMaxx is think like an adversary, defend like a guardian. Our premier application is MDR, managed detect response, but we also have solutions within offensive security, pen testing, gap analysis, tabletop exercises, as well as others. We can support you. And there's also security control management. We refer to it as SCM, but these are the complex tools such as EDR, next generation firewalls, vulnerability scanning, things that you need or require the expertise to support those. We can provide that as well. But getting back to MDR, we have 400 global customers, or north of that actually today. Over 1,200 protected locations. It's a service that is a 24/7, 365 days of the year. It's a follow the sun application, so you always have a ready to go cyber analyst, as far as fresh and looking at those alerts. We've identified over 1,000 attacks in Q4 of last year alone. And then our expertise across the verticals of healthcare, state and local education, utilities, and financial services, as well as others. So moving on. So the problem as we see it today, right, where MDR evolved from, we've actually in the industry. Actually, we got a message already. Do you see a message there, Steve? Anyway.
Yeah. So in your solution, do you offer phishing email support? Yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. It's a great question.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to cover some of those things, but phishing email support is definitely part of our application. We can do it a number of ways, as far as support, whether it be, something in an Intune, in Azure, as well as GWS and others. But that's something, we'd be more than happy to have a sidebar conversation with you and diving deeper into it. But great question. So the problem, as we understand it, as I mentioned, is just lack of talent, lack of headcount today. These complex tools, as I mentioned, to find that right individual that has the expertise and knowledge, the training to get into the details of that particular tool, right, to properly configure and tune them. And essentially, if they're misconfigured or not configured properly, leads to tool sprawl. It actually generates a lot of noise in the form of false positive, benign types of alerts. Makes it difficult to see that true alert. And hence why we feel MDR is an urgent piece of a solution to support various clients that has the expertise, that has the knowledge sets, that understands these tools, that they can properly configure them and therefore find that alert when it presents itself. So moving on is where we understand the term boom. The term boom is the event, right? That event would be in the case of an exploit. If it's ransom, could be where the encryption takes place. If it is an exploit, right of boom would be data exfiltration. If it were ransom, it's receiving that ransom note. Left of boom are all the behaviors to get to the event of boom, right? So what we see is conventional MDR or MSSP providers. They have that visibility. They understand your telemetry and support of you. They'll take a lot of data in, log information. They can do some detection based on those behaviors. But it's the handoff, right? The right of boom handoff, that ticket. It might have some details. It gives recommendations. It points to the potential threat or where the alert derived from, but it doesn't have mitigation, right? It might make reference to something, to an endpoint where you might isolate it. But again, that adds a dwell time. It gives the threat actor that more time to do malicious type of harm within your environment. The max MDR is where we have that asset visibility. But again, in the industry of as long as we have, we've been able to make a determination of the various vectors. What gives the best log value. We refer to this as the grade 8. That's the next slide. I'll cover that momentarily. We'll get a little deeper onto that. But it is something where, that SOC analyst, we want to give them the best information that really makes sense of value, whether it be related to the endpoint network, cloud, your infrastructure, and what you're supporting, where your intellectual property resides. So as that event takes place, we see that within the behavior, and our response is giving the full scope of compromise evaluation. What does that mean? Well, we want to understand the root cause, where it arrived from, what it did, as far as infection, and then mitigation. Mitigation is key because we want to get in front of that and make sure that that threat is taken care of in your behalf. We want to give you that rolled up into the ticket, have a conversation, because it doesn't end there, right? Because there might have been a gap. How do we close that gap? Is it with an email? Was it a phishing event, or was it something else? So those are things that are important in the value of supporting our clients, and we refer to it as an extension of your team. So
And
moving
I, and
on.
I, Neil, I
Go ahead.
would, I would, I would point out for our audience to take note of attack surface reduction there, because we're going to talk about that a little bit more. That's going to be a very important factor in how CyberMaxx delivers its MDR service.
Key point. Yeah, thank you for that, Steve. Appreciate it. So that telemetry vectors I spoke of, the grade 8. This is the best value, right, to that SOC analyst visually, right, when they have the alerts and these detections getting fired. Endpoint being the goal of that threat actor or threat group. That's the key number one piece. We align with the best tools would be the tools you're using, but we feel on the endpoint, ideally CrowdStrike, SentinelOne, Microsoft Defender are the best. Reason being is because they're unfiltered data, right? The telemetry associated with that behavior getting fired. What does those processes look like? What's happening in the back end behind the scenes? That's something that is key within our application. Cloud infrastructure. So, you're in Google, you're in Azure, AWS, those support various applications, email within Azure or Google, what have you. Network security, also big. So taking your, alert log data from your firewall, your IDS, your IPS, network sensors, also key. We want to see if there's, any lateral spread or things that are reaching out to malicious locations. Also important via your web DNS. So if, using Blue Code or Zscaler, those logs as well, important telemetry. User identity, definitely key, right? That's something we also look to gather information as far as log event information. Then the goods, right? Where are your applications, your sensitive data, right? Databases, things like that. So let's take in, alert log data from there, and then fitting in with your, compliance and or auditing, trails. So directory services, more database activity, but last is the behavior analytics. So this could be something can be conceived as insider threat information, right? Where certain users go to the certain patterns every day. They go out of that pattern, in the middle of the night, early evening hours, maybe with system or admin privileges. That's something we would need to alert on, let you know, inform you. Do we need to stop this? So we want to get in front of that and make sure that you understand that. So, in doing this and categorize them into a bucket of different 8 vectors, we're giving the best value, reducing the noise to the SOC analyst, so not sifting through more log information, and we're actually lessening the ingest of that, to that SOC, so that that's something, we're not passing that cost to you, right? We're actually just limiting it to a lot less information as far as gigabits per day. So we see this as a huge value add. Steve, you want to take it away?
Yeah. Hey, thanks, Neil. Appreciate it. Yeah. So a moment ago, we talked about the attack surface reduction, right? So I want to kind of dive into that a little bit and talk about what that means, right? So contrary to many MDR vendors in the space, we work with our clients proactively to, identify potential blind spots, gaps, anything else that would be something that we'd want to address to help the client or customer elevate their security posture and put them in the best possible position. So what does that mean? Well, one of the key things is continuous threat exposure management, right? So this is really a key differentiator for CyberMaxx. So what it means is that we do continuous attack surface scanning, right? This is for looking for vulnerabilities. It's looking for maybe misconfigurations, for the external attack surface. And we also do continuous monitoring on the dark web, right? What are we seeing there that could be a problem? But the culmination of both of these activities results in identifying potential, indicators of compromise, indicators of attack. Are we seeing botnet activity? What are we seeing in terms of vulnerabilities? And then when you get into the dark web piece, you get into maybe specific findings as it relates to people within the organization, or duplicate domains, or not duplicate domains, but like domain squatting, very similar looking domains. So we look at a wide breadth of things to make sure that our clients are informed on these activities and what we're seeing. And that just helps better posture them, from a cybersecurity standpoint. So if you could
Perfect.
go to the next slide, Neil.
Yep.
And so how does it work, right? So this is probably, you probably see some variation of this slide with almost every MDR vendor, but again, coming back to that proactive security piece, the continuous threat exposure management, which I just talked about, we also leverage deception technologies, right? Whether it be software tokens, hardware tokens, as well as our offensive, security practice and what we glean from threat intelligence, right? So all of those facets really inform our detection library, and we have a very robust detection library that's continuously updated and modified based on the needs, right? So if we pivot back up to the upper left of this screen, right? Neil talked about the great 8, right? Those 8 sort of telemetry vectors that we want to pull in. As we pull that data in, if something, we get a condition, an event, something looks nefarious, possibly malicious, it bounces off of our detection capabilities and goes into our SOC. And this is where, our SOC analysts are able to take a look at that and understand, hey, is this benign? Is this a false positive? Maybe it has credence to it, right? So we will initiate a full scope of compromise evaluation to understand, to Neil's point, the root cause, right? So this is understanding the blast radius. Is there any lateral movement? Are there other affected systems within the environment? It's a full evaluation of a potential threat, and then where needed, we can take response directly from within our SOC on the client's behalf. If something extends beyond what we can do, we immediately work with the client, work with them hand in hand to take other actions, whether it be identity related or whatever the case may be. So and you know what, for other maybe more pervasive types of situations, we have digital forensics and incident response embedded within the SOC so that we can immediately transfer, in a manner that is warm. So it's a very quick transfer to continue to drive, the response effort around any sort of threats that we see. And that's something that's yet another differentiator that a lot of organizations don't have. So that can cost time, to make that sort of transition. So, but regardless, what we do on the proactive side and what we learn through, our investigations, whether it be new tactics, techniques, procedures, we take all of that and we put it back into our detection library. And so that's really, how we're able to kind of stay on top of the latest threats. So with that, Neil, if you could go to the next slide.
Certainly.
And then another differentiator that I kind of want to talk about is really our tech-enabled MDR, right? So, um, oftentimes when you talk to some of the vendors out there, they kind of push you into proprietary solutions, right? You have very limited choices. That's not our take, right? So we like to say that we have a glass box versus black box approach. That means that we provide SIM flexibility, to our clients. If a customer has, say, Devo, or Splunk or Exabeam, we can weaponize, right? So we can CyberMaxx weaponize those solutions, with our MDR capability, as well as the flexibility around the endpoint, right? It's no secret that I think, for most people, they know that SentinelOne, CrowdStrike, Microsoft Defender for Endpoint are really the leading endpoint protection platforms. We can operate within those for our client base and take response actions. But just, the idea of having the flexibility around the underlying SIM, XDR platform, is really key, because, some are proprietary, some maybe you have like one choice, but that's very important to our clients. So, let's go ahead and go to the next slide.
All right, Steve.
Oh, I think we're getting into the case studies now. This is what everybody's been waiting for.
The good
Um,
stuff.
yeah, the good stuff, right? So this first case study is basically a possible malware detection, and we're going to take you through a few different case studies to kind of highlight, some of the things that we see on a very regular basis. But our SOC is able to respond. So in this particular case, last year, there was a suspect EXE that was launched within a client environment, and this particular case really falls in line with, like potentially unwanted programs or spyware, things of that nature. Essentially, it was Splashtop. It was a type of remote desktop software that was attempting to run on a target endpoint. And so the investigation commenced within our SOC. The SOC analysts immediately grabbed that. They started evaluating the processes that were running. And upon evaluating, the hash and validating what it was, they immediately notified the client, and it was determined to be, software that it basically wasn't corporate approved, right? So if you think about that, right, this goes back to the touch that we have with our clients during onboarding, right? So we're going to want to understand their environment, understand their systems, understand what's approved, what's not approved, what actions they would want us to take in certain situations. So as we move through this investigation, the SOC, after notifying the client, they did go ahead and terminate the process, remove it, and conducted a full system scan of that particular host. And what happened was this was really a result of the vendor working, a third-party vendor that was working on a system, and they were attempting to install this software. And so when we think to, like, years back, right, the Target breach with the whole HVAC thing, this really highlights the importance of third-party vendor management policies. And this is kind of why we wanted to kind of highlight this is because, there's many angles in terms of, what we need to address to, protect organizations. So, that was the possible malware detection that turned out to be a third-party vendor. Neil, did
Yeah,
you?
If I could just add, I mean, you hit on a key piece here because, is it, do you have the time to maintain all that, right? We can work with you as far as what's allowed, these remote desktop protocols, these applications, right? Are they allowed? Should we whitelist them or we could blacklist them? We can keep a list of what, that inventory looks like so that it makes it easier and effectively we can manage it in your behalf and that we can set it to a user group, put times restraints around it, things like that. So that third party comes out there, installs software, obviously it'll get blocked right away. But outside of that, we can make it easier and more effective in support of you. So that's excellent. Good point, Steve.
Thanks, Neil. And next up, we have an account compromise, right? So, what happened in this particular situation was CyberMaxx discovered a likely account compromise of a user. And what happened was our SOC reached out to the client, and it's really interesting that at the point where we reached out, we found that other internal users within the organization were reaching out to IT, and they were reporting, phishing activity from one of their fellow employees, right? So what happened was that a victim user received an email from a trusted affiliate. It contained a link, and we know that some people can't resist the idea of clicking on a link. So that particular user did click on the link. They entered their credentials, and essentially shortly after doing that, a bad actor gained access to that user's account and started performing, various actions. They were sending out phishing emails to the other users or employees within the company. They were creating Outlook folder rules. They were accessing mail items, and other types of activities, right? So that, going back to our boom slide that we talked about, this is the point of boom, right? This is where that attack occurs. And so to Neil's point, CyberMaxx, our SOC analysts jump in and invoke a full scope of compromise evaluation. And in working hand in hand with the client, obviously we isolated the host, but this is an example of a type of attack that we had to stick with. So the continued analysis led to not only the user's password being reset, but revoking any active sessions that were present, and in driving that investigation and enumerating all the malicious IPs that were involved. We were able to block IPs on behalf of the client as well. So this was a really interesting use case that came down, but we identified it, immediately engaged the client, worked hand in hand with their team, and really kind of led them to these are the actions we need to take to make sure that we put a stop to this. So
Key points. All right. So this case study is EDR, also ransomware, but this is last year, and that this particular event, with the SOC being alerted, or let's say a threat being triggered, is also EDR. So that was done at 10:03. We see by the analyst at 10:06. In that, looking at this particular activity, it was deemed to be a not such a malicious, but more suspicious. It was an unsigned binary, and as everybody knows, code is signed by the manufacturer, right? Where if it's unsigned, it means it could potentially be tampered with, meaning it makes it malicious, right? So the idea here is that the analysts looking at that a particular event or alert being a low-level alert, they're still going to pivot into the telemetry to start the analysis, right? So at this point, the analyst would take that next step. In doing such, looking at the telemetry, or the process tree in this case, it was followed to see that the potential threat is from suspicious turned malicious because it was beaconing. It was beaconing out to a C2 server or command and control server. And that at this point, the full scope of compromise evaluation starts. It commences, right? So we want to go back, take action immediately. In this case, the host was isolated. There's a process was killed. and that particular binary is blacklisted, right? So its hash was blacklisted. And in doing such, what happens is that if you have other users receiving this particular threat in the form of phishing, let's say that's the vector it came through, even with system or admin privileges, it can't be fired. It can't be executed upon. So that taking those next steps, right? And that's all left of boom. Handing the ticket over to the particular, client, informing them of what transpired, 1015, that full scope of compromise remediation, all the mitigation steps and everything we took, the root cause of all those steps, the conversation, doing a reset of the credentials with that client, but also was determined that particular endpoint was involved in other malicious mishaps earlier that month. So it was deemed to get the incident response team involved, right? Because we want to start an investigation. And at that point, because of the event that transpired earlier, we didn't want anything else to happen, right? So their suggestion in this case, the um, having to do a reimage of that particular host was the best suited to make sure that all eviction of any threat information which pertaining to that particular endpoint was taken care of, so that, as I mentioned, full eviction of any threat group or threat actor in those steps, and then monitoring for that particular user and or endpoint was fully resolved. So that you could see was the time resolved 8 minutes effectively. But again, the steps as far as the gap associated with that, in conversation, conversing with the client, that they're satisfied with the response, the mitigation, getting in front of it before it became a full-blown ransom event. We got in front of it. So that was as far as that particular case study. Any questions anybody would like to post? I think we're pretty much at the end of our talk here, and I do appreciate anybody out there joining. We're open to having more conversation, diving deeper into the technology. We'd love to share, what that looks like. We have a lot of information that we can dive deeper into those various vectors, show you what it looks like, to be a client of ours, our solution, and supportive of you. As I said, there's a lot of variation to it, is that we can help support you as well, in other forms. But
Yeah.
we're happy that you
Yeah.
could attend and take the time.
Yeah. And Neil, we do have a question. Do you give your clients access to their log data or alerts? And absolutely, we do. This goes back to the glass box versus black box. So
Right.
if a client, some organizations just are like, hey, I just want you to protect me. Maybe give me a little bit of access to understand what you're doing. I don't need to get into the weeds, but for clients that do want access to their data, we can absolutely provide that.
Yeah, if you want to do your own queries, that's a good point. Steve, you outlined it quite well. I think it being available, even helping you design those queries on your behalf, generating those
Yeah.
particular reports that outline anything or something that you might see, and do an investigation, and work as a team together with our analyst. We're totally transparent to that, and that's a huge point. Anything else there? Any other question?
We do have another one. Yeah. In the continuous threat exposure management, do we look for web impersonation or user credentials? You want to take that one, Neil?
Yeah, so web impersonation is a phishing site, I guess you can call it as well. It's pretty common these
And
days.
domain squatting, right? Domain
Domain
squatting as
squatting.
well.
Yeah. So that's all included. Credentials as well. So if there's like a data dump or breach, as we refer to it, those are things that we're looking for, right? So we want to find those. It could be credentials of current, past employees, but effectively, those are the things that are threat actors are out there looking for. Using those is a proactive approach. We feel it's a very important. It comes with our solution. It's not a add-on, because again, having the full, application, we don't want to be missing pieces. It helps us as a company in support of you, as I said, extension of your team, to have these different applications
Yeah,
solution within one application. Go ahead, Steve.
yeah, and I just want to emphasize what Neil said there. You know, anything dark web related, a lot of this sort of external attack surface scanning, these are not necessarily capabilities or services that are provided as part of the typical MDR solution. It's very important to highlight that CyberMaxx includes this by default. It's not a separate service offering, not a separate cost. It's included with the service.
Any other questions?
One more about do you employ honeypots or other similar tech on behalf of your customers? And I think I kind of touched on this a bit. Yeah, I mean, deception technologies, we can do that from, file or software based, deception tokens or, hardware based tokens. And Neil, I don't know if you have anything else you want to add on that front, but it's absolutely a part of the service. So.
Right. Yeah. I mean, these deception tokens, the old school name, honeypots, but, these are software or hardware based software. They can do lots of things in design of those. They can make it look like a database. They can make them look simple as a password directory or a file, something that would maybe be designed that would be based on the latest type of threat, right? Of the goal of that particular threat actor. Um, um, in a hardware, it could be look like a server, even down to an OT type of SCADA application as well. So we have a good expertise within that, but essentially we feel it's a good piece that we offer this again as part of the solution. So it's just I can't say enough about that. When you're buying the package, you're getting the full package. You're not having to bolt other things on in support of that, right? So it's a key piece, and we feel the solution is uh, giving you full coverage. So great question.
Awesome.
Excellent. Anything else? I think that's a wrap, Steve.
All right. Well, to our audience, we really appreciate you guys joining. Again, I hope that kind of the key takeaway here is that, in terms of CyberMaxx MDR, we really provide a lot of value, and in many cases, capabilities or features that, you don't necessarily find with some of the other vendors that are in the marketplace. So, again, we thank you all for joining, and hope you have a great day.
Take care.
Cheers.